Welcome back. Here we are, the second week of Ecumenism with Ted Janiszewski from the Irenaeus Center in Rochester, New York. Last week we talked about his family's upbringing into the Protestant church, but in the wonderful way that they navigated into making sure that faith was a very important part of the family. We left off with him talking about being raised Episcopalian, and that is where we start off here. So without further ado, we're just going to hop right back into the second part of the episode. Just a reminder, all of these episodes are recorded all at once. So if you haven't listened to the previous episode, you might want to before jumping in. All right, here we go.
So over the course of my, my walk, my journey as an Episcopalian, I would say the balkanization of the Episcopal Church, right, in the early 2000s, when which culminated in actually my bishop who signed my Book of Common Prayer, Bishop Robert Duncan, Pittsburgh, very very fine Christian man. He was excommunicated by the Episcopal Church for refusing to recognize the ordination of, the gay bishop in New Hampshire.
Of course.
And then,
of course,
he was, then the Diocese of Pittsburgh voted, about 3/4 of them, voted to leave the Episcopal Church and bring on Bishop Duncan as the first Archbishop of the Anglican Church in North America, ACNA.
Yeah.
Right. So that really started out of Pittsburgh. And all this was going on when I was in high school. And I lost friends over this, because myself and my family, I think we had always been, always just kind of in a default way believed in biblical marriage, but no one had ever asked the question. And so it was like just kind of an unexamined thing. But when they asked the question, we said,
you jumped directly to the more biblical
exactly
of the two.
And so we were already like we just by our circumstances, and I will say my parents are still they're still Protestant,
still ACNA. No,
actually they go to a Lutheran church right now. They moved from Pittsburgh to Delaware.
Are they?
But this is yeah.
LMC.
It's Elka, unfortunately, but it's I think a nice what do you call it? It's a nice parish. The preaching is good. They do a lot of charitable stuff. It's near where they live.
I mean,
and that just goes to show, like, the Presbyterian, Episcopalian. Like, my dad was baptized Methodist. It's all like the mainline kind of churches. They do have distinct traditions, and yet they're to a certain degree kind of interchangeable.
I mean, in a way, I guess they're closer to Catholic still, because the ECLA signed a joint declaration with the Pope.
Yeah, and the Elka and the Episcopal Church anyway they do have intercommunion. So, like, you can actually have a Lutheran pastor go and preach and preside at service at an Episcopal church, and vice versa. Like, they have that, and I'm not sure what their status is with ACNA, but it's not that. Yeah, it's like not that different. Okay, so another thing that was happening to me when I was in high school was I was part, and this really led to my what would you say? Not a conversion experience exactly, but my David, the founder of my ministry, always used to say that there's no such thing as a second generation Christian. Mm-hmm. Right? Every generation must take hold of the faith for itself. Right? You don't go to your wedding and stand at the altar and so you don't say we do. Right?
You say
you have to say I do. Right? You don't look back at your grooms and say, "What do you think, fellas?" Right? You don't look at your parents out there, right? you have to say yes to our Lord, right? And so my process of making the faith my own really happened in the context of a youth retreat called Happening, which is kind of like a teen version of Cursillo,
okay,
I would say. Complete with, rainbow stuff, although it didn't mean that, at the time, right?
It was the actual rainbow of God. That
exactly,
rainbow?
yeah.
Okay,
and it was very De Colores, was the kind of it's like a Latin American kind of, actually it started in Spain, I do believe, Cursillo. And so I was, I started as a participant my freshman year of high school. I was on the staff all the way through, and it was in the as I was volunteering, and eventually my senior year, I was the rector of this whole retreat. The experience of having people actually like looking up to me as a Christian leader and role model and asking me questions, I had to get my faith together.
Yeah.
Right. And so I read the Bible for the first time, like, cover to cover. I really, cultivated a habit of prayer. I tried to figure out, what my Christian faith was really about. And the pastor, I would really consider him at the time, my pastor, right, of the Happening movement, was very, very important in this process. He's the one who actually picked me out to be the rector. And I think he thought that I had the makings of an Episcopal / Anglican pastor, because when I went off to college at RIT, he kept in touch with me, and we had an internship set up for the summer between my freshman and sophomore years of college.
The way you say that sounds like you didn't actually end up going over the summer break.
Right. So the pastor of the Happening movement, really, I would consider him kind of my, spiritual anchor, right? He had planned for me to be his intern, basically shadow him over the course of a summer, see, down in Uniontown, see what being a pastor was all about. But at RIT, God had different plans. Over the course of my freshman year, I became a Catholic.
Yeah.
So that which was,
you met all the usual suspects that I now know.
Exactly. Yeah. So Todd Duncan, Pete Matola, now Father Peter Matola, right?
Yeah.
Al Derby, Ed Brannon, the difference for me, the change in my life, which really, brought me into the Catholic faith and into this life ministry, was actually seeing Catholics
be Catholic.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. For the first time, because I knew Catholics, quote unquote, right? There were Catholics at my lunch table growing up. And I would say to them, what's with this, what's with this Mary business? Right. Or purgatory, show me that in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And my Catholic friends would be like, I don't know, man, I just work here. Right. They had no idea. And again, they were like my grandfathers, they weren't catechized. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were going through the motions. It meant something to them, but they were not prepared to give a defense.
No.
Right. Like it says in 1 Peter
3:15.
And so, And so I, Protestant Ted was saying, hey, put up or shut up. What's with, and when they couldn't give me an answer, I just assumed that the Catholic Church didn't have an answer.
Yeah.
And I dismissed her claims. I just well, that's one church I don't need to worry about, because clearly
they've got nothing.
Exactly. When I came up here to Rochester, I met Catholics who were in every way exemplary. They knew the faith. They were actually they were men. They were mature. They were biblical. And it's interesting. I actually met them, talk about ecumenism. The Cardinal Newman Society at RIT at the time was kind of in a rough way.
So that didn't change between you and Jack.
What's that?
That didn't change between you and Jack, is what you're saying.
So I was at it was I think a similar phenomenon. So I was at RIT. He was at the U of R.
Yeah.
But at RIT at the time, the chaplain, I don't want to tell tales out of school, but I'll just say he was a Buddhist. He was really interested in Eastern religions, and I don't mean like Eastern Orthodox.
Yeah.
Right. So my sole contact with the Newman Society at RIT, which thanks be to God is a lot better now, was there were flyers up talking about Eastern spirituality and meditation in all of the stairwells in the Golisano building where I had my classes. And I remember just thinking, like, what religion is this? I met my Catholic friends actually at InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. So
I've been to like 2 meetings of InterVarsity, right? when I've been in college.
Yeah. Well, tell me about that. So when I was in college, this time I was at Full Sail University for audio, and I wanted a Christian community. Saw a flyer for InterVarsity, and I went. And I had talked to some of the people, and you were talking about how, being a Protestant, when you met Catholics, they didn't really have any good answers. I'm a convert, totally. So I went from nothing to Protestant to Catholic. And if I hadn't already known apologetics, the people that I met in InterVarsity were not the best representatives. I later saw them doing things that weren't so Christian, and if I watch them now, they're definitely not the people you would see at a Christian gathering. Okay.
So when I said that, I didn't expect to explain and be like, yep, nope, InterVarsity was not a good place for me.
So interestingly, like, and just like the first season, at least the Newman Society at RIT was really not where you wanted to go to mass, right?
Yeah.
But thanks be to God, there was at InterVarsity it was large, vibrant, very faithful, very welcoming, Christian group at RIT for that season, and just like you go to another university and the Newman Society is going to be, solid as a rock, and InterVarsity might not be, so sound, right?
I wish I had seen a Newman Center. Maybe it would have made me Catholic sooner. And then there was I know I would have been in the personal ordinariate sooner because it was walking distance from my apartment. I found out after I moved out of Florida.
Wow.
I would have been able to walk to mass if I had become Catholic. But
what a story. And yet, God knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
He
got me home to help my dad, a global pandemic, then I became Catholic,
Right. That sounds like a pretty good story to me. I sometimes think on my childhood and all of the time that I wasted playing video games when I could have been, learning Greek and Hebrew.
Yeah.
And I think the one time in my life, when I had time, right, I decided I needed to like max out, Zelda Ocarina of Time. Like that's really what I needed to do, was get every single heart piece or whatever. And it, so I feel like the whole, like, at least my adult life has been a process of remediation, and yet the fact that I didn't know anything, not even, I won't just say like of the faith, right? I was not super well catechized, at least until I got to high school. But even just in terms of like civilization and culture, right? The fact that I was deprived of that led to my valuing it all the more in kind of a counterintuitive way. And so like, the fact that I'm here, let bygones be bygones, don't cry over spilt milk, right? here we are, and thanks be to God, and let us drive forward to the victory.
Yeah, and I mean, you said let bygones be bygones and not cry over spilt milk, especially milk that you didn't spill. Like,
right.
It was there, and you just had to deal with it. You picked up the mop and you cleaned it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, right. And I feel like, especially when, we didn't know better.
No.
We were kind of like muddling through as best we could.
I mean, the only reason I became...
And thanks be to God, he took that and was pleased with our stumblings, right? Yeah. And through that process, made us able to walk and now run.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason I became Protestant is because it was a Protestant friend of mine who said, come with me to a Bible camp, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, there was no real... I was baptized Catholic, but they fell away, and so a Protestant picked me up.
Mm-hmm.
And then because I love Jesus, during a pandemic, I had no time to do it. I didn't have any need to do anything but read. So
yeah,
finding out the history, I'm just like,
and
okay.
Yeah, and one thing that
I didn't even realize this was spilled, and just walked into the pile of milk on the floor.
Yeah, and this whole I guess in a way, our project now, like our mission, is to try to help people who are out there kind of, I think of like, Ezekiel 16, right? Cast out, in the plain, weltering in their milk, right?
Yeah.
They don't, and they don't know better. And I want to take the riches and the glorious, the goodness, beauty, and truth that we have in our tradition. And I want to give it to those who are living in rags. I want them to have, the absolute best. People who are starving, like I want to take out of our larder and set the table for them.
Yeah.
And make them hale, hearty, and strong. Like we need that. Like in this world, which is so hostile to any expression of faith, we need the strongest case that we possibly can make for Christ. And we have it.
And to be joined together with those who know and want to bring it out as well.
Amen. So I came to RIT. I went to InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. A friend of mine from my church back in Pittsburgh said, just look up IBCF, they'll take care of you. And hilariously, the small group that I got connected with was this group of Catholics, right? It was a Monday night kind of Bible study prayer group. Interestingly, they started with a rosary, which was kind of like unofficial, say the thing started at 6:00, right? The rosary was at 5:30. So like the Catholics got there a half hour early. And then the group was actually mixed, right? It was like some Protestants, some Catholics. Actually, there was one guy who was the direct descendant of Martin Luther.
Did he become Catholic?
His name was right. Yeah, no, he was Methodist. But
no,
he was, but like
Catholic
7
again?
generations back, he was descended from, and like direct, it was a direct line, father to father. He was descended from Martin, right?
Yeah, but no, my question was, did he become Catholic, like through this group? Did he?
He did not. No, he but he was, it was interesting. Even though I don't know what Protestant group he wound up in. He was like really good friends and bosom buddies with this group of Catholics, and so he would come after the rosary, obviously, but like the study part was we were reading Thomas Merton's New Seats of Contemplation, right? And a lot of the discussion, so I was again like echoes of my lunch table in high school. I'm surrounded by these Catholics, and so I would say what's with this Mary business? Purgatory, show me that in the Bible. And these people had answers, right? Like lo and behold, I all of a sudden, here I am, freshman in college, and I've run into some Catholics with a pulse, and like they know their stuff. They were really quite sharp.
They don't just work here. They know they're
Exactly.
glad to be here.
Exactly. Yeah. And Pete Matola, now Father Peter, he had just come into the church from Methodism, and he actually was the one who introduced me to David Higbee, here at the St. Irenaeus Center. He gave an announcement at another Bible study in our dorm, Baker Bible Study. And he stood up at the end and said, if anybody's interested, there's a New Testament Greek class starting up at this off-campus study center on Saturday mornings.
And you were like, sign me up.
And I said, heck yeah. Are you kidding me? Like New Testament Greek? Like I had Latin in high school, and so I was so up for this. You have no idea.
Well, I mean,
and so,
anything, right. If my wedding is anything to talk about it, before leaving, you were reading my New Testament Greek manuscript.
That was fun.
Nonchalantly, you took it off the shelf. We were all talking, and you're just like, no, I'm going to read Greek today. That's all I'm going to read is Greek.
So I've actually been doing, that was really helpful, because I've been doing, working my way through the Gospel of Luke at our Bible studies here at the center. And so, I was just reading the next chapter. Anyway, that was, you have the bookshelf of somebody who went to Bible college, and I love every single volume,
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
It took the entire pandemic to get some of them. Most of them I got during college. Yeah.
Yeah, you've even got a few over there that we don't have in our library yet. So anyway, yeah. I started studying New Testament Greek, and like, again, what a world, to live in, that so get in my car, drag my sorry rear end out of bed on Saturday morning. I get in my car, carpool with some college friends, and there's this group of Catholic laymen, some, raising families, some retired, at this Catholic study center, with the walls lined with books, right? And they're there, books. They're there studying, the Greek language with a mind to, reading the inspired word of God, as the apostles wrote it. And like, they're Catholics. Like there's one group of, lay people in the Diocese of Rochester who are like, we want to learn, we want to learn to read the Greek New Testament. And that group of people was Catholic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, pretty soon I was here. I was coming to Friday night St. Titus Fellowship, still ongoing. I did the Tuesday night Bible study, which at that time was over at St. John Fisher College. Saturday work days, Sunday brunch, right? This was my community here at the St. Irenaeus Center.
Yeah.
And like, this was where, the conversations happened. I mean, they gave me the church fathers to read, the apostolic fathers. I was reading St. Jerome's Contra Helvidium, right? Arguing, against, it is also his treatise against Vigilantius, or should I say Dormitantius, right? Just like nobody hurls an insult like St. Jerome. And like arguing in the 4th century AD, arguing for, a Catholic, position on the perpetual virginity of Our Lady, right? On the intercession of the saints, right? Like just like marching down through, I saw that the early church was Catholic, and, I had to deal with that. They also gave me, I still remember in this computer printed handout in kind of ye old English, this old translation of the justification canons of the Council of Trent. And I remember reading that. And I mean, I still remember the motion of my soul as I recognized that this is the Holy Spirit. You know what I mean? Like, mm-hmm. This is just the truth. And this is what I've been looking for, because the question, I mean, this is, I think, a common story for many Protestants. The question of predestination, of the operation of grace and its interaction with free will is a fraught question. It has to, how can you have a just God when he predestines some people to be reprobate, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's, but that's, and again, just like I was raised kind of a default premillennial dispensationalist, right? I was also raised kind of a default Calvinist, and it just never sat well with me. It really tortured me, and because I didn't see how what Paul clearly seemed to be teaching in Romans chapter 9 could square with the idea of a loving and merciful God, let alone a just one.
Yeah.
And I kept reading and rereading Romans 9, saying I must be missing something, And it wasn't until I read the Council of Trent and I said, this is it. Like, this is the truth. This upholds both the sovereignty of God and human free will.
Yes.
And it's Catholic. Oh, shoot. Right.
I remember
this is bad,
my first course on Trent. I had it all in audio because I had to do it, what's it called? Online. And I was just like, oh, okay. What do I do with this?
Right. Well, and that's kind of that's kind of where you're left, right?
Yeah.
And so another thing, the 16th century, every Catholic, I'm sorry, every Protestant at a certain stage has to make a decision about what happened in the Reformation. You know what I mean? Like, what do I do with the fact that, like, Martin Luther, repudiated his vow of chastity and married a nun. What do you do with the fact, Henry VIII, like, for crying out loud, right? That was, like, for me, reading, the story of St. Thomas More and watching A Man for All Seasons and just like mulling, and then reading the 39 articles back in my Book of Common Prayer. I had to come to terms with how my own Christian tradition, like how it was born, how it came to be.
Yeah, I mean, the King Henry thing itself, I wanted to be Anglican, right? I wanted to go that route because C.S. Lewis. But when you get to that point, I'm like,
yeah,
that's not a good reason to have left the church. It's not a good reason to start a new church.
And it's just an interest. So at this point, really, my story kind of, in a way, intersects with the story of David Higbee, the founder of the ministry, which I now direct.
All right, that's where we're going to leave off today. Come back next week for the continuation where David Higbee and Ted Janiszewski meet and become a mentorship that led to Ted becoming the director of the center's ministry. All right, so again, thank you for coming, and God bless. Bye-bye.